I was mopping marble at 2 a.m. when a billionaire asked me for financial advice as a joke. His friends were already laughing, whiskey glasses in hand, waiting to watch the janitor trip over her own tongue. I looked him in the eye and said, "Your Hartman merger is going to fail. You're overpaying by 40%, and you'll be upside down by Q2 if you push it." Silence, the kind that makes your skin buzz. If it were you, would you smile and play along? Or would you risk everything to tell the truth to a man who could crush you for sport? Here's the part that wasn't written on my name badge. 7 years earlier, people like those executives would have begged for 5 minutes of my time. I wasn't a janitor, then I was the person with a calculator and a whiteboard who could make markets dance. Harvard, early MIT after that, Goldman Sachs at 23, a couple of papers on algorithmic trading that made old men blink. And then I married a beautiful lie named Conrad Hayes. He stole my research, framed me for insider trading, fed the story to hungry reporters, and told me if I fought back, he'd take our daughter. Yeah, that happened. You think you know what you'll do when somebody threatens your kid? You don't. You go invisible. You shrink your life down to what you can carry. You learn to make yourself small enough to survive. So at 2 a.m. on the 72nd floor, with fluorescent lights hissing like tired bees, I pushed a mop and ignored the hospital texts vibrating in my pocket. My little girl Brianna needed medication we couldn't afford. We shared a bed in a 400-square-foot apartment where you could hear the neighbors argue through thin walls where a pot of noodles counted as dinner. And a good day was a day I didn't choose between rent and asthma meds. I kept my head down, my uniform clean, my voice quiet because safety and justice rarely live at the same address. You know what I mean. Then he walked in like he owned gravity. Julian Whitmore, billionaire CEO, movie star face, the kind of confident that gets dangerous if it's never told no. 3 executives swaggered in behind him, Ty's loose laughs already loaded. "Simone Wright," he said, rolling my name around like a party trick, "settle a debate for us. Leveraged buyouts in a rising interest rate environment, yay or nay?" He was performing for his friends. It was a dare. Entertainment. I almost bowed my head and kept scrubbing. Almost. But there's a line inside you that remembers who you are, and mine stood up. "You're overpaying by at least 40%, I said, voice steady, hands shaking only where nobody could see. "Your due diligence missed 3 subsidiary debts that will pop inside 90 days. Your integration timeline assumes headwinds that don't exist. And Hartman's CEO has been selling his personal shares for 6 months. He knows something you don't. If you proceed as planned, you'll be writing apology emails by spring." The laughter died. One executive went pale. Another started thumb-fighting his phone like the truth was a fire he needed to put out. Julian's amusement slid off his face like water. "Who are you?" he asked, but the voice that had laughed was gone. "Respect has a different weight." I picked up my mop bucket. "Nobody," I said. "Just the janitor." Pattern interrupt. I walked away. He said, "Wait." I didn't. Because hope is a dangerous substance if you've been sober from it for 7 years, and I couldn't afford a relapse. Here's what nobody at Whitmore Tower knew. I had a second life stacked in a storage unit on the edge of town. A battered laptop, a busted printer, 3 bankers' boxes of files. Every offshore account Conrad touched, every copied trade, every suspicious payment in and out of names you don't say out loud. I built a map of the lies he built out of my work. But cases like that need time, and time needs money, and money was the one thing I didn't have. The morning after that hallway moment, my phone rang. "This is Jennifer Chan, executive assistant to Mr. Whitmore," a voice said, crisp and unbothered. "He'd like to meet at 2 p.m. consulting." 10,000 for 2 hours. A car will pick you up at 1:45. Click. $10,000 for 2 hours. Do you call that fate being generous or a trap with better lighting? At 1:45, a black Mercedes swallowed me whole. The driver didn't blink at my thrift store jeans. Marble lobby elevator that moved like a thought conference room. Ciao. A with a table big enough to land a plane. Julian stood by the window, sleeves rolled shadows under his eyes that said he hadn't slept either. We checked, he said, sliding a tablet across. Everything you said is true. The debts, the shares, all of it. How did you know I said? Public filings. The trick is knowing where to look. He studied me, the performance gone. I spent the night researching you, he said. You're using your real first name. The last name on your file isn't Patterson. You're hiding. I won't ask why. Help me. Save this deal. You set the rules. Anonymity, no photos, remote work if you want. He tapped his phone. My phone buzzed. 15,000. You said 10, I whispered. I should have led with more, he said. Call it a signing bonus. Pattern interrupt. Hope hit me like a body check. I took the file home, kissed my daughter goodnight, and opened a war. By midnight, I had the bones of a plan. By 2 a.m., I had muscle. By 3 a.m., I had a staged acquisition that didn't just save his merger. It doubled the value. Stage it. I told him the next day, a whiteboard in my hand, and that old voice in my throat, take the medical device division, first wall off the legacy divisions, under a 1-year transitional services agreement, rebuild their infrastructure while you harvest the value you actually paid for. The integration lead, a 50-something named Tom, who wore skepticism like a tie, tried to wave me off. I pulled a line from Hartman's HR record that mentioned their IT director's resignation and the missing system documentation. He stopped talking and started writing. The team that had smirked at the janitor started calling me the professor. I didn't smile. I didn't have time. Julian surprised me. He listened, adjusted, covered the basics. A car, so I wasn't crawling off a bus at midnight meals that tasted like someone remembered food, matters, a medical supplier account, so Brianna's inhalers didn't come with shame attached. It's selfish, he said when I tried to refuse. If you're worried about your kid, I don't get your best brain. Help me be selfish. If it were you, would you take the help? Or would you see a chain in every kindness a powerful man offers? We were 3 weeks into the plan, the numbers humming, the skepticism dying, my kid sleeping through the night in the temporary apartment his team arranged. When my phone lit up with a Lagos country code, the voice oiled my name like a blade. Or should I call you the janitor, he said. Conrad wants his research back. Your algorithms, your files. 48 hours. Or he files for custody. This time you lose. Judges like clean stories and yours is dirty. Line dead. World tilting. Pattern interrupt. I walked into a boardroom full of suits, walked out, found Julian in the hall. I quit, I said. I have to disappear. My hands were shaking again, but not from hope this time. Fear has its own gravity. Was that Conrad? Julian asked, voice quiet. I froze. I've been investigating him since the day after we met, he said. I know what he did to you. I know who he bought and who he broke. I'm not guessing. He made 3 calls in front of me. Security to my building. A protection detail for Brianna. Eyes on Conrad overseas. You're not alone, he said. Not anymore. I didn't know what to do with those words. Nobody had offered me them in 7 years. The safe place he took us to didn't look like safety. It looked like a film set. Tall trees, high walls, cameras tucked like little owls, doors that closed with reassuring weight. Brianna thought we were on a vacation. "Are we in a spy movie?" she asked. "Something like that," Julian said, then lost at Go Fish so convincingly you'd think he'd practiced losing. We sat by a fire after she fell asleep, and I told him everything. Meeting Conrad at Goldman, the whirlwind romance, the wedding dresses, and whispered promises the day I came home to agents at my door, and evidence that wore my fingerprints but moved to his rhythm. "I chose my daughter," I said. "I chose disappearing over courtrooms." He didn't argue with me. He didn't tell me what I should have done. He said, "We're going to finish this." Here's the twist that flipped the board. Helen Martinez, Conrad's former assistant, had been waiting for years to tell the truth to someone who wouldn't die on the vine. She had emails that traced bribe money to investigators who made my case vanish. She had recordings where Conrad bragged about swapping my life for his bonuses. She had the receipts. Tony, the PI. Julian hired, flew her in, and Patricia O'Brien, a lawyer who could turn statute into a scalpel, laid out the path. We could go quiet to the FBI and wait months, or we could go public and force the machine to move now. Public meant cameras, headlines, hands pointing at me in grocery stores. It meant Brianna's mom on TV. I looked at my sleeping kid at the folder in my lap that smelled like a future and said, "I'm done hiding." Noon the next day, we stood under lights that make your pores tell the truth. Julian opened with 2 minutes on corporate responsibility and then stepped back. "Dr. Simone Patterson will tell you her story," he said, and a dozen microphones turned toward me like hungry birds. I told it. The frame job, the stolen research, the quiet settlement that silenced me as a condition of keeping my child. I put the emails on the screen, the wire transfers, the voice memos with dates and names. Patricia walked the room through the law: fraud, bribery, obstruction, theft of intellectual property. Tony connected shells to shells to shells until the path wasn't complicated anymore, just bolded. Helen spoke, hands shaking, voice steady. By 1 p.m. there was a federal warrant. By 2 p.m. Nigerian authorities had Conrad in a room without windows. By 3 p.m. the outlets that once called me a villain spelled my name like a new word for gravity. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Calls came faster than breaths. The firm that fired me wanted to reconnect. A dean asked me to keynote. A hedge fund dangled a number that would make most people stop blinking. I walked back into Whitmore Tower through the front entrance, this time past the marble I used to clean, and Julian asked me to be his CFO, not as a favor, not as absolution, but because it was the smartest move on his board. I said yes, with a contract that protected my work like a fortress, and a schedule that protected my kid like a heartbeat. We got to work. Integration hit the revised timeline. Efficiency ticked up. Risk ticked down. Profit moved the right direction without eating its young. I wore a red suit to the board meeting where the chairman said on the record that hiring me was the best decision they'd made in a decade. I didn't cry. I breathed. Sometimes that's bigger. The trial felt like a montage and a marathon at the same time. Samantha Torres prosecuted like she'd been waiting her whole career for this exact lie. The defense tried to paint me unstable, angry, unreliable. If you know, you know. Evidence did what evidence does when it's allowed to stand up straight. The jury took 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict hit, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a door open in my chest and fresh air rush in. It feels like freedom, I told a reporter outside. It feels like I can stop paying rent in shame. You're wondering about me and the billionaire. Fair. He didn't save me, I saved myself. But he was the first man in years who didn't ask me to be smaller so he could feel bigger. He used power the way power should be used. To shield, to clear a path, to hold a door without stepping through first. We took it slow because that's what grown people do after they've swallowed fire. 3 months of just working, being friends, letting my daughter decide if this was family or a phase. He burned the rolls on purpose the first time he cooked for us, and Brianna laughed so hard she hiccuped. We moved in together a year later. My choice, my timing. When he finally went down on one knee, it wasn't to fix me or complete me, it was to ask if I wanted to keep building something true side by side. I said yes. Then I went to work the next morning because joy is a practice and so is payroll. Here's the messy truth. My ex went to prison, and there are still men like him sitting at nice tables ordering nice wine, and women like me still get told to be grateful for proximity, while somebody else repeats their ideas in a deeper voice. A verdict doesn't disinfect a culture. So we built a foundation. Legal help, crisis funding, career rebuilding for women who've been chewed up by systems that apologize only after the camera turns on. The phone hasn't stopped ringing. That breaks my heart and fuels it at the same time. One last picture. Few months after the dust settled, I stayed late at the office and the night crew started their rounds. A woman in a blue uniform came into my space with a cart and a quiet that I recognized in my bones. I stood up so fast I knocked pens off my desk. "I'm Simone," I said. We talked about kids and knees and how people leave half a sandwich like the other half isn't a paycheck. I asked her what she would change if she ran the place for a week. She blinked, then told me. I wrote down every word. The next week, we did 3 of those things. You can call it a symbol if you want. I call it remembering who cleaned the floor you're standing on. So that's my story, told the way I lived it. Breathless, sometimes bitter, sometimes soft, when the hard parts finally gave way. If you're waiting for a perfect bow, I don't have one. I have a life. A daughter who sleeps without nightmares. A job that tastes like purpose. A partner who looks at me like I'm the miracle, even when I'm just a tired mom with takeout and spreadsheets. I have a city that used to look like 1,000 promises I'd never touch, and now it looks like 1,000 doors I can hold open for someone else. Let me leave you with something a little uncomfortable because the comments should be alive, not polite. Are we okay with a world where a woman's brilliance needs a billionaire's microphone to be believed? Or are we going to build systems that recognize genius in a blue uniform without an introduction from a man with a title? Do you think that's fair, that power has to stamp truth before we hear it? Or should truth get to walk in on its own 2 feet in flats and a red suit and be enough? If it were you, what would you have done? If this hit you anywhere close to the chest, tell me where you're watching from. Tell me which part felt like your life. The fear, the fight, the win, or the after. Drop your take, challenge mine. Share the story you wish someone had believed when you first told it. And if you want more real stories told by people who've had to become their own rescue, hit subscribe. Share this with one person who needs a reminder that invisibility is not destiny, and answer me in the comments. Are we brave enough to see the people we've learned to overlook?